Hi Rik, please could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Rik Cheston. I'm Professor of Dementia Research at the University of the West of England. Before that I worked for about 25 years in the NHS, and during that time, together with Anne Marshall, we created the Living Well with Dementia post-diagnostic course.
Great, thank you. So Rik, we're starting a short series of video blogs, and I thought it'd be best to ask you about some just general questions around what comes up in LivDem. So the first question is, are there times where you meet someone and you're unsure whether they've been told about the diagnosis? How would you assess those people for LivDem?
Yeah, well, this is a very common issue. It's often the case that we don't always know what somebody's been told, or even if they have been told their diagnosis. And if they have been told, sometimes people will use sort of euphemisms, or the person may not completely understand. So when you meet somebody for the first time, you're often just trying to assess their extent or their capacity to talk about dementia in some way, or their willingness to talk about it.
So what would you advise people to do?
Okay, well, I think there's a number of different strategies here that you can take. The first strategy is probably something that you can do most easily if you're working in a memory clinic or maybe a community mental health team, where you're part of that process of assessment and diagnosis, and you've probably got access to that person's assessment, to maybe so that you know who's carried it out. You might be able to see from the letters who's made the diagnosis and when it was communicated. So you've got those things with you. And I think what you can do in this position is really what you're trying to do is to assess this person's capacity, not whether or not they say, I have got Alzheimer's, I've got dementia, but their willingness to engage with dementia as a possibility. So you might want to start just by asking them, how did you come here? How did you come in contact with our service? And if the person's not sure, you can prompt them about maybe did they go to their GP? Who took them to the GP? Was the GP worried? Were other people in their family worried about them? What happened after that? Often people remember different bits of the assessment. So they might remember if they've had a scan, they might remember that, or they might remember serial 7s or being asked to spell world backwards, or some of those bits and pieces. So you can prompt people with those things about what they remember. And as you take them through that journey, you can then come on to whoever made the assessment and made the diagnosis, and if they remember that. And it may be that somebody will spontaneously say, and yeah, that's where I got the diagnosis, or maybe they will ask you. But if you've got their assessment records there, you can sometimes refer back to that. And as long as you do that in a thoughtful, kind, sensitive way, so that we try to make this as least threatening as possible, and to get some, as I say, some what we're assessing here is somebody's willingness to talk about their worries and fears about dementia, for instance. Sometimes it may be that you say, look, people who come to this service often worry that they're going to have something like dementia or Alzheimer's disease. Is that something you've been worried about? I think that's a sort of question that I use a lot, because I think it means that I'm not directly telling that person you've got Alzheimer's, but I'm asking them, are they worried about that? And the person's reaction to that is really helpful, because some people will talk and say, yes, I'm really worried, and then you've got an entry into talking about the diagnosis. For other people, they would say, no, nothing further from my mind, or no, you've just got to soldier on with it, you can't give in to it. And then again, you get an understanding of how they're coping or how they're managing things. So I think that's sort of where you're really unsure and you've got access to the records, taking someone through that journey, using that sort of indirect framework, that can be really helpful.
Okie dokie. But what about those that don't work in a memory clinic?
Yeah, well, it gets a little bit trickier then, but I think there are still some elements of that strategy you can use. But it may be that the person you're meeting them at home, or you're meeting them residential care or something like that. But you still want to have some sort of conversation with them about what's happened. And the way I would try and do that, it may not be possible to do that conversation about the assessment. But maybe you can have a conversation generally about getting older, and about what happens when you get older. I'm in my 60s now, and I'm very aware that my kids and their partners are not necessarily running rings around us, but they're much sharper, they're much more active. Students here at the university keep me on my toes constantly about remembering things. So, maybe it's, 10 years ago I didn't have glasses, maybe, you can talk about hearing, eyesight, physical nature of change occurring as we get older, and that includes some element of cognitive change. So if you can start to have a conversation with somebody, again, just about what's been the hardest thing about growing older, about whether they then worry or wonder about their memory, for instance. We know, that's not specifically about dementia. We know memory gets harder the older we get. I can't remember, as I said, I can't remember as many things as my kids can. So if you can start to have that sort of conversation, and again, that can then lead into the sort of indirect things that I mentioned there about whether they were ever worried about what might happen to them. I certainly know that I'm worried about it. I certainly know that people in my age group are starting that I know are starting to be concerned or to think about the future. So it's not unreasonable to think that the people we meet will also have those concerns. And if you can begin to look into that, and again begin to get an idea of how they deal with it.
That's great.
The final thing I'd say is that there's what I call about bringing dementia into the room. So this is if you start to notice, so if someone has a problem with short-term memory, and often what they will try to sort of, if they're feeling very sensitive about it or very difficult, they will try and sort of cover up for it in many different ways. So they may, you may find that somebody is not using your name or not using people's name, but they're using as sort of, one lady I mentioned used to call everybody in our group my lover, this big Wiltshire voice, because she couldn't remember people's names, so she was covering up for that way. Other people will do things like, I may have told you this before, or forgive me if I'm repeating myself, as a way of sort of socially sort of mitigating that possibility that they're repeating themselves. So if you notice that somebody's doing that, those sorts of cover-ups, or if you notice that someone is making a slip, they're repeating themselves, for instance, then you can just say something, again, try and do this in as gentle a possible way, but just say, look, I can't help noticing that you're not using my name, or I can't help noticing that's now 3 times you've said this, and I just wondered whether you had ever worried about your memory. Again, what you're doing is you're assessing somebody's ability to talk around their dementia. You're not assessing whether they can say, I've got Alzheimer's, but can they talk about their feelings about it? And that's really the crucial thing for LivDem, that somebody is willing to talk about and around it, even if they're not talking directly to dementia.
That's great. Thank you so much, Rik.
And good luck.